Hello there, and welcome to episode 16 of Nothing Else Mattress, the music podcast that's setting out to try and establish what we think are the 100 greatest rock and pop records ever made. To do that, we are initially reviewing the latest Rolling Stone top 100 albums and voting those albums in and out. Once we've done that, we'll start to debate what the gaps are, and at some point we'll have a final 100. We've done 75 so far, and I think we've voted 48 in, which is 64%. So been fairly tough school. Going to do another 5 tonight, or today, sorry. And on today's podcast panel, we have Lisa Semple. Good afternoon, Lisa.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. You?
Great, thank you. It's unusual to be doing it during the day.
I know.
We'll see how that goes. And we also, as you know, like we're guests. So we have a guest tonight who's a friend, the music lover, a fanatical gig goer, and Velvet Underground super fan, Binnie. Caroline, good afternoon. How are we?
Good afternoon, Brian. Good afternoon, Lisa. We're very well. Nice to be sitting in a nice warm room rather than out braving the elements.
It's very nice.
Absolutely.
If we survive the podcast recording, we might tell the guys at the end how difficult it's been to get us all together on this one. But I'm sure it's worth the wait. Okay, so we've got 5 more to do. So let's kick on. So the first one from the Rolling Stone list we're talking about tonight is Carole King, Tapestry. So I'll do a quick update from the Rolling Stone commentary, and then Lisa will take us away. For a decade, Carole King wrote pop songs with her then husband, Jerry Goffin. Hits such as Little Eva's The Locomotion and the Monkees' Pleasant Valley Sunday. Then King's friend James Taylor encouraged her to sing her own tunes. He just made it look so easy, she recalled. So I did Tapestry in the same spirit. She slowed down Will You Love Me Tomorrow with Taylor and Joni Mitchell on background vocals, heightening the melancholy inside, while her warm, earnest singing brought out the sadness in It's Too Late and the earthy joy of I Feel the Earth Move. As King later recalled, I wasn't in the same league vocally with Aretha, Joni or Barbra Streisand, but I knew how to convey the mood and emotion of a song with honest, straight from the heart interpretation. The resulting collection of songs saw King remake herself as an artist and became one of the biggest selling albums of all time, creating the reigning model for the 1970s female singer-songwriter. So that was the Rolling Stones summary, Carole King Tapestry. It was released on the 10th of February 1971. Lisa, tell us about Carole King.
Right, so you've just about said everything that I was going to start with. So,
Sorry about that.
So thanks for that. I had it really well planned, you know. So right, okay. So yeah, she clearly already had a career as an established songwriter before Tapestry came out. She was 15 when she signed her first contract for songwriting, which is quite incredible. Daughter of a piano teacher, I think, and a firefighter. And yeah, obviously she's got so many greats that wanted to sing her songs, so that's testament to her talent, I would say. Apparently John Lennon said that he quite fancied him and McCartney being the Goffin King of England.
Yep.
Don't know whether that's true or not, but apparently he did say that. So she was clearly already a bit of a legend in her own right, but she didn't see herself as a performer. And I watched her. I watched something recently where she was doing backing vocals for James Taylor, and she looked very relaxed and very happy and very smiley, and clearly not being the main focus of attention. So you can see that was obviously something that she felt less confident about, but it was him that, as you said, Brian, persuaded her to actually sing and perform her own songs. So she made Tapestry. Oh no, she made Winter first.
Yep.
Which didn't really, gain much traction at all. But it was when Tapestry came out that she really sort of found the new side of her life. And by this time, I mean, she was married by 20 with 2 children. So she then escaped from, when I say escape, she divorced and found a new life. She was meditating and, became vegetarian. And this was like a rebirth for her, I suppose. So the actual album itself Tapestry, I feel as if like the name of it is very much like the cover. It's very homely. She's in her jeans, her cat's there. She's a mother. She's not like a glitzy pop star type of person. And that really the album cover reflects that. And the name Tapestry kind of, to me, it kind of represents the style of the album in terms of it's really just her voice intertwined with the piano, James Taylor's kind of in the background, but it's all very sort of natural, pure. And okay, she doesn't have the best voice, but I think that the emotions that she's singing about really come through in her voice, just because there's so little going on. It's so unadorned, if you know what I mean. Lyrics are really simple, based on her experience, of life. You've got a friend, you're so far away, you're beautiful. It's just everything that's important in life. Friendship, relationships, but done very simply. I mean, you can hear in her voice, the loneliness and so far away, or the heartache of it's too late. And of course, friendship's quite important. I think, especially the fact that James Taylor was the one that persuaded her to do her own thing and to go with it. And he eventually, I think he did #1 with.
He did, yeah.
With You've Got a Friend, which is kind of nice. It's that whole theme going through that, sort of the thing they have with each other. Sorry, I'm kind of wittering on here a wee bit, but I love the album, always have done. It's one of these, I think when we're thinking about, top 100, does it stand the test of time? And I absolutely think it does. It's an album that I think a lot of people go back to. Certainly when if you're feeling a bit down and kind of, I can put that on and it's like a comfort blanket, it kind of it lifts you a wee bit. It's like chicken soup when you're ill, it has that kind of effect on you.
It does, yeah. It's a bit warm and fuzzy, isn't it? It's got that kind of personal.
It's just really about the basic things in life that are really important, and sung by person. She wrote most of the songs. I think a couple by Tony Stern she wrote with.
Yep.
But this is very much her work and her music. So yeah, so it's one that I always go back to. So I'd say in Tapestry, you've definitely got a friend.
Well done. I like that. And so her first album wasn't, as you say, it was popular but not particularly successful.
Yeah.
And this was almost make a break for her because she was almost a kind of anti-pop star.
Yeah.
I think the intro said about singer-songwriter was just kind of coming through at that point, and her and Taylor and Joan Mitchell and Christopherson and a whole bunch of other people all kind of then poured through. But at this point, recording it, she was still a bit of an unknown artist, and it was interesting that the people who backed her were all kind of fairly well known. James Taylor you mentioned, Joan Mitchell you mentioned. It was produced by Lou Adler, who was very famous producer from sort of 60s into early 70s. So she obviously had kudos in the trade. It was just whether she could kind of get that out into the market and make it work.
I like the fact that she was recording next door to when Joni Mitchell was doing Blue. Yeah. And when they weren't in the studio, they would nip through and use Joni's piano because it was much better quality than the one they were using.
Yeah.
And then again, as a testament to her as a songwriter, apparently Joni Mitchell's favourite song of all time is Will You Love Me Tomorrow?
Well, there you are. I can't argue with that. And of course, that was a #1 as well, wasn't it? For the Shirelles, like 10 years earlier or something. So, so thanks for that, Lisa. That's cracking, and it's a nice summary of kind of what is really an album that I think everybody knows one way or another, but maybe take it for granted a little bit because it's been around for so long and it's kind of so omnipresent across the market. Caroline, what's your take on Tapestry? Is this something that you've been with for a while now, or?
Not so much.
No?
Not so much. I mean, I know it, but I don't know it perhaps as well as some of the other albums we're going to be talking about today.
Okay.
But I mean, I think it's got an honesty and an authenticity, as Lisa said. You know, it's the songs are simple, the arrangements are quite simple, but it comes across as sort of heartfelt and genuine. And I think what you were saying, Brian, about it being perhaps taken a little bit for granted, I was surprised when I read that until the advent of Adele, it was actually the album by a female solo artist that spent the longest at #1.
Right.
Which surprised me a little. I knew it was successful, but I hadn't realised quite how stratospheric it was at the time.
Yeah, well, she had so 30 million copies in America. It was on the Billboard for 313 weeks consecutively, which I think only Dark Side of the Moon, I think, it had a sort of longer gestation period in that. So not only was it popular when it came out and it was a kind of best-selling album, but it then just kept going. So, and what about her as a performer? Have you sort of saw much of her doing that, Caroline, on sort of TV and stuff?
I watched. You'd mentioned the documentary, so I watched the documentary about her, and I think you know, she's not the most confident of performers, but in a way that actually makes her all the more engaging, because you know, it feels much more like she's putting her heart and soul into it rather than it being a very polished performance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also,
I like the fact that she when she was performing like Natural Woman live, she would say to the audience, right, I don't want you to think about Aretha doing this, because like, of course you wouldn't. You know, she knew her limitations. So I thought that was quite funny.
Have you saw the Aretha version? So I think she was inducted into, I don't know, it was a Hall of Fame. I think it was a Kennedy Honors or something like that in America in 2015, Carole King, and Aretha did a version at the time. And it's...
And Carole was in the audience.
Yeah, Barack Obama and
they were...
amazing, absolutely amazing. And I suppose it's one of these ones when you think, you know, Aretha, I think we've already reviewed her, and I think we'll get another one to come with her as well. So when you have wrote a song and somebody like her's covered it, I don't know where you go with that really, other than going back to what the original song was and sing it as a demo, really, almost.
That's what she said. She said, imagine it, that this is the original demos when I was writing these songs for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, she then kind of almost stepped back a bit again, really. I know she continued to perform and sell records, but she didn't seem overly keen on having a sort of megastar career. So even in the 70s and 80s, she became pretty low-key again.
Well, she was too busy being a mum and going through husbands. She did have a few husbands. Well, that takes a bit of time, you know.
She did indeed.
It's a bit of a distraction, I would think.
Yeah. And do you have a sort of favourite song on it? I know you mentioned the Joni Mitchell Love of Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow. Is there any songs in particular that jump out at you, Caroline?
That's probably mine as well.
Is it?
Yeah.
And do you love it? Do you love it because of the song or because of how different it was from the Shirelles version, or is it just what it is? Or
I think it proves how strong a song is, that it can be done in two very different ways, but still, you know, the truth and beauty of it comes through.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Lisa.
I think I do love that one, but I think for me it's definitely Natural Woman. I think there's just a sort of passion in that song that I have always loved, and it's quite often my party piece.
Is it?
Yeah, but I don't even sing it as well as Carole, so I wouldn't force it upon you.
You don't want to stick a few bars on now? No? No. And it's the afternoon, right?
Maybe for the New Year edition, I'll do one.
Yeah, maybe. A couple of other things to kind of mention on it then. So she obviously came out the whole Brill Building thing. And I think I read 118 US hits that she's wrote or co-wrote, 61 in the UK. I can't even rhyme them all off now, but it was a couple in the introduction there, but I was amazed at the number of songs that I didn't know that she wrote or co-wrote. It's fantastic. She won the Grammy in 72 for the album, which was the year after it came out, and she had that concert in Central Park, I think, in 73, is that right? Where she did she kind of first person really to do that sort of big free concert thing there. And again, that was, she was very nervous about it, nearly didn't do it a couple of times. And then she did it, and it was 100,000 there, and became a bit of a sort of roadmap for her. going forward. So yes, a cracking backstory. The other thing I thought was quite interesting was that she was still doing sort of session work. I think you mentioned about her singing backing vocals and stuff on something else, and she played on the BB King album from, I think it was 70, Mississippi Seeds, and she just plays piano on it. She didn't do anything on it. She's just a session pianist playing with BB King, and she said it was one of the greatest things that she ever done. So she obviously had her chops from the writing and playing, and then she had this kind of front of house thing. And I think, as you said, she struggled a wee bit to balance the two off. But you look at what she delivered here; it's unbelievable. A couple other comments from the guys here. See what they said. So David F. Ross sent a couple of comments in. David says, Carole King, absolutely, yes. Some of the greatest, most timeless songs ever written. And in quote, Tomorrow, arguably the most intimate, longing love song ever. From David. So George said something along the lines of it, and I can't always repeat what George says, but A says he loved the record, and B said it was bleep and disgrace that it was as low as number 25 on the list. So he's a yes on that as well. Okay, cool. So we can have a wee vote on it. I think there's obviously a kind of a bit of love for it as well. Oh yeah, the only thing I was going to mention just to finish was that I think the interesting thing for me was that she had the number one singles, which at the time wasn't really a thing. So when she released This Too Late and I Feel the Earth Move, I can't remember which order it was. I don't know if you read that, where one of them went to number one, and then the radio station started playing the other side, and they basically sort of flipped it, and then the other one went to number one. So they ended up having two number ones really with with the same single, if that makes sense, which again was kind of so unusual at the time, other than say the Beatles and stuff. Certainly was no singer-songwriters managing to do that. So yeah, it's a cracking backstory. A PS to all that, of course, is that the Beatles covered one of her songs, didn't they, on her debut album, on their first The Beatles album, which was Chains, one of the old early 60s pop songs that her and Jerry Goffin did. So yeah, they were sort of toying with that idea, Lisa, of doing the
Have you heard the Isley Brothers version of It's Too Late?
Don't think so.
It's quite a kind of jazzy, slowed down version of it. It's quite an interesting version, yeah.
No, don't think so. I know she only, I only read this just as a finishing off, but she played Hyde Park about, was it 6 or 7 years ago?
Yeah.
And she played the album through. And that was the only time to date she's ever done it. So she wasn't flogging the album for 30 or 40 years. It's I think it was quite a big thing for her to go back and play it in full again. So cool. Right, okay then. So let's see what we've got. So the guys who aren't on, we have, believe it or not, we have a full house, every single person. Yeah.
This is unusual.
John Welsh, George.
Although I have to say I'm not surprised.
Everybody, George, Jack Goliath, Martin Metcalf, Chris Thompson, Skin, Dixon Telford, David F. Ross, every single person has either said it's good or it's great, and deserves its place on there. So, Leah, let's do a check-in on that. Lisa, what are you saying on that?
Definitely in.
Yep. Thank you. And
Caroline? And I'm with George, it should be higher up.
Me too. Caroline?
Definitely in.
Definitely in. Well, if only they were that easy. Feels as if we talk about it forever. To Twitter, we're 77% yes on the poll that we did as well. So again, sort of fair bit of love out there for that one. So we'll take Carole on and move to the next one. Get some discussion going, no doubt. Okay, so we're going to do Notorious B.I.G. next, which is actually number 22 on the list, but we'll do that one next. So, Ready to Die by Notorious B.I.G. Notorious B.I.G. spread the love the Brooklyn way on his classic debut, introducing us to the most immediately likeable voice in hip-hop history. I made the record for New York, but I want the world to hear it, he said. Ready to Die executive producer Sean Puffy Coombs, who had read about the fledgling Brooklyn rapper in the Source magazine, pushed his new discovery to live in the stick-up kid self-mythologizing of Machine Gun Funk and Gimme the Loot, with inviting party pop like Big Poppa. But if it was Biggie's gift of the gab, enormous personality and sense of humour that made Ready to Die so wonderful, Whether he was offering a 360-degree vision of the main streets on Fort Greene on Things Unchanged, kicking it Bonnie and Clyde style on Me and My Bitch, or delivering rags to riches brags like Birthdays was the worst days, now we sip champagne when we're thirsty. In the process, he changed rap forever. He ends the album with the dark prophecy of suicidal thoughts. As with Kurt Cobain, his tragic death, while still in his 20s, will always leave us wondering how far he might have gone. Quite a long one, that, but that was the Rolling Stones summary. Notorious B.I.G. Ready to Die. It was released on the 13th of September 1994. Caroline, Notorious B.I.G.
Yes. This isn't my normal listening, and I hadn't heard it before this exercise, but I absolutely loved it.
All right.
I really liked it.
That's interesting.
I think it's got amazing storytelling in it. It's very vivid. When you're listening to it, it's almost like you've got a movie running through your head of the various stages, you know, the conflicts that he's going through, the samples, the swearing, the shooting, the screaming, the misogyny, the drugs, the violence. It's kind of perfect little vignettes of obviously what he was experiencing in the environment around him at the time. Very autobiographical, as you said. It came out when he was 21. And it's actually his only studio album because he was shot about 16 days, I think, before his second studio album came out. It was by 2018, I think it had gone platinum 6 times, so clearly extremely successful. And it's also the top of Rolling Stone's list of the greatest hip hop albums of all time. Were
you surprised about that at all? That top of the hip hop list, or?
Well, I would probably have to listen to some of the others before I made a judgment because it's not really my genre.
Right.
One of the things that did strike me, though, was I happened to be in his territory last year in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And when you walk around Brooklyn, he's very much a presence there, and you realise just what a significant figure he was in that particular community. He's got a street named after him, Christopher Wallace Way, and there are murals everywhere. So, you know, you're in absolutely no doubt that that's where he came from. That's where his heritage was. And, you know, even though it's a good long while since his death, he's still very much celebrated in that community. And I guess that was quite powerful for me because I'm probably not his target audience, whereas his own community clearly embraced what he was doing at the time very thoroughly. And I watched a little documentary about him, and his mother was featured in this quite heavily. And at one point, she said to me, you know, why Christopher is there all the swearing and, you know, the bad language and, drugs and whatever in your songs. And he kind of, at that point, he said, Mother, I don't expect anybody over 35 to listen to my music, which I think probably means that we're well out of his target audience, some of us.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and also culturally, we're kind of a bit disconnected as well, aren't we? I think we've had this chat with other albums and hip hop albums, and we've found it quite difficult, if I'm being honest. And even on the last one, I think we reviewed the Wu-Tang Clan record, and John really liked it, and Ian Smith didn't. And it was that.
Yeah, watch that.
Debate. Yeah, both really valid conversations, but very difficult to assimilate, I think, when you try and work out what these guys have been going through. At the time. And
I mean, I think, you know, we'd go back to the bit about storytelling. It's actually a very long album. It's over, I can't remember, it's about 116 minutes long, and it's very, very detailed, and the amount of content that is in there, given he was only 21, is just astonishing. The way that he's using the samples, the way that he's using language, just how he gets, you know, his feelings across, I think is really, really, really impressed with that.
Is it too long, Caroline?
I think it might be too long.
Yeah, I think the original album, I think, was about 70 odd minutes, and then you've got like the kind of remixes and the add-ons, the demos and stuff like that.
That's like that, yeah.
When it's 70 minutes, that's a fairly chunky record. But, I mean, you're right, there is a story there for sure, but it's quite a long story, isn't it? So it's just whether he can keep the audience, really, I guess, for all of that. Did you feel as if he had managed to do that with you? Or?
He managed it for me, which surprised me quite a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that there was definitely a story arc through it that kept you wondering what was going to come next.
Yeah, well, it did do very well. It did well when it was launched, but obviously retrospectively it did very well because of his legacy. But then the second album came out, I think, a couple of weeks after he passed, wasn't it? And again, that became stratospheric, really, and that then bounced back to the first one. And he's 28 million records or something, just in America alone now, #1 singles, a whole bunch of stuff, really. So again, we talked about Jay-Z a while back, I think, and he was one of the first, really, that crossed over to being like massively commercial, as well as having the kind of street credibility and stuff. And Biggie Smalls definitely seems to have done that. I wonder whether, you know, his passing was maybe partly to do with that. I think the guys mentioned Kurt Cobain, didn't they? And but we've done Hendrix and stuff on other ones, and you know, these guys are great, but you wonder whether if they had kept going for forever, whether some of that reputation might have been sort of tarnished slightly by subsequent releases. Hard to tell, I guess. And have you got a view on, you mentioned the kind of content, if you want, of the record, because it's pretty wide ranging, but is any of it uncomfortable for you, the kind of misogynistic side of it and those kind of conversations that are in there?
It's uncomfortable listening, but I don't think he wanted it to be a comfortable listen. I think he was telling his truth as he saw it. And you know, I don't think it's for me to say that's not acceptable. I mean, I think it gets back to that thing about you know, the artist and the sentiments and whatever. It's difficult to separate sometimes, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out on the basis of the content, because I thought there was enough interesting stuff going on there. And any album that starts early on with a sample of Superfly is okay with me.
Absolutely right.
Superfly, Rapper's Delight, the whole bunch of stuff there, wasn't there?
Yeah, there are some quite kind of graphic moments in it that you think, okay, but as Caroline says, there's so much more to it.
So what was your take then, Lisa? What do you think? Thanks, Caroline.
Well, you know, I've struggled a wee bit with some of the rap albums that we've been reviewing, just because it's just not, you know, something that I'm familiar with. And I've kind of failed with some of them, I have to say. Others no, but I came to this feeling a wee bit kind of, I'm not going to like this, and I persevered with it, and I played it in the car, and I played it at home, I played it in the kitchen, and I got asked, "Why are you listening to that?" You know, and I'm like, "No." Oh, and they say, "Oh, for the podcast," and I really did come to appreciate it, and as you said, Caroline, what an incredible work for somebody that's only 21, you know, and it is obviously very autobiographical, and I mean, some of the language is brutal, and it's kind of the title itself is tragically prophetic, you know. The kind of life that he lived, it's like it's so sad that he kind of knew that he wasn't long for this world, and there's that sort of duality going on about, you know, there's robberies, there's drug crime, there's gun violence, but you know, his mother's not well, and he's got a baby, and you know, he wants to put food on the table. You know, that was the life he had, and that's kind of how he justified it. But I mean, the way that he sings it about it, or tells the stories more like through rap, for us to listen to, it just makes it quite incredible. As Caroline said, it's from the very start, it's very cinematic. You know, it starts with you can hear the beat of the baby's heart in the womb, and he uses sound effects throughout the whole album, you know, and then of course towards the end there's the sound of his heart stopping, which of course we know this was going to happen only a couple of years later. Yeah, I just thought it was a very honest portrayal of what life was like for him.
I genuinely don't know this. Is the title prescient? Is it? Because obviously it was part of that. He'd been in jail at 18, I think, for peddling cocaine and stuff like that. And part of the early part of the record is him saying basically, "I'll never come back again," type thing. So was he sort of foreseeing what he thought was going to happen, or was he just doing that sort of gangster attitude type thing?
I think so, because I mean, there's a song, Everyday Struggle. He says, I don't want to live no more. I can't remember exactly. I hear death knocking at my front door. You know, he knows that it's a risk of his, you know, his everyday life.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. That's just me. I think he does. I think that's what everyday struggle. That's what he's living with.
Yeah. Just interesting, isn't it? Because obviously he dies in the second album. Again, I don't know whether it was going to be called Life After Death.
And also in Respect, he says, I'm seeing my death before I've taken my first steps.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and he describes these things incredibly lyrically. I mean, his rhymes are fantastic. I'm terrible for remembering them, but that's one thing that really did strike me. There was his real talent for that, you know, and I really enjoyed the whole album. But I would say yes, possibly a bit overlong.
Yeah, me too. I'll mention a couple of comments from the guys, and then we can have a wrap on it and have a vote on it. So David Ross said it's good, but I wouldn't put it in. He doesn't think it's nowhere near as good. Something like Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys or 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul. We've had that chat as well about one or two other sort of fairly good hip hop artists that aren't on the list, which I guess is always the way. I've got a comment from Goliath here. So Jack said, Ready to Die is a yes. I always liked Biggie, but that was just off his singles. I'd never listened to a whole album before, and honestly, the album has a great theme and feel to it, punctuated by some great samples and smooth rap from Biggie and others. It always surprises me how much Jack knows. Right, is he 20 or something, isn't he? It's frightening. So yeah, you know, a bit of a mixed bag from the others. There was quite a few of the guys were honest enough to say it's not an album I've listened to a lot, and they didn't want to call it either way. But John, George, Chris, Dixon and David were all no's on it. Skinwood didn't know it. Martin Metcalf wasn't so sure. So I guess we're kind of left to call it from our end. For what it's worth, the second album, I kind of didn't, I don't think I'd ever heard the second album. The second album's really good, Live After Death. I don't know if you remember, when we did the Jay-Z stuff, we did 2 of his albums, and the first one we didn't vote on, but I think we voted the second one on. And I felt there was a bit of a sort of jump from one to the second. And the second one is much more sort of diverse than the first one, much more sort of melodic, and his subject matter, there is still a lot of gangster stuff in there, but his subject matter seems to be a lot wider. I enjoyed it a lot more. I like the kind of the humour and the kind of soulfulness and stuff that you get in some hip hop rap, and this first one's it's a pretty tough listen really in some stages. Anything else you want to mention on it, and then we'll have a vote. Twitter didn't love it, but they haven't really loved much of the hip hop rap we've done, which probably says a lot about our audience. I'm afraid. Any other comments? Will we have a vote on it? Please, Caroline, sorry, you started.
I would probably put it in.
Okay, like that. Very good. And is that a surprise you? That meant you hadn't heard it a couple of weeks ago?
Yes. I wasn't really looking forward to listening to it at all, but I've listened to it quite a few times, and I'll certainly listen to it again.
Good. We genuinely have loved, I think John and others have called out many albums that we wouldn't have dreamt of putting on a list of 100 greatest until we've actually heard them, which I guess has been half the fun of doing it. Cool. Lisa?
Well, I have to say that I was pretty impressed with it, and I think I might put it in.
Okay.
And there's still, I feel as if there's so much more for me to tune into with it. You know, there's so much going on that I want to go back to it, and I want to, you know, experience it a wee bit more, because there's so much I want to tap into that I haven't already.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think with every listen, you take something else from it. It's one of these records, there's so much going on that, you know, you take something else from it every time you listen to it.
So a PS to all that, and before we move on, is that this is something that I've kind of formed a view on as we've been listening to this, but I think I like rap in sort of bite-sized chunks. Some of my favourite songs ever are rap hip hop songs, right? But for me, once I get past that kind of EP length, yeah, I don't know, 4 or 5 tracks, 20, 25 minutes, whatever that is, it's probably just my ear, it's probably a blind spot, but I struggle to then stick with it for 60, 70, 80 minutes, especially with the amount of content that's in there, or the lyrics and stuff that you need to get stuck into. So I think that's one of the reasons that I'm struggling to vote them in. It's not that I don't like them. I think that I get a bit of kind of hip hop fatigue as I'm listening to
that's your age, Brian.
I think I genuinely think it is, and I think that's not their fault. That's my fault. But I don't really get that with I don't know, a Bowie album or whatever. So it's you know, there are other long albums. We did the Beatles White Album just recently, and I think we all voted it in, and it's 80 odd minutes, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that's a bit questionable. So it's not about length per se. I think it's just about maybe just the consistency of the content. It's really heavy, isn't it? It's just hard to get to stick with it, I think.
I think that's one of the great things about doing this podcast, because I've never done anything like this before, is it's making me listen to music that I would never have discovered and never would have listened to. I mean, my kids tell me that, you know, more recent artists, you know, really look up to Biggie, you know, that's who they want to be like. So he's clearly well thought of.
Well, I make that, although we're 3 yeses, I think. Goliath was a yes as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. I make it 5 no's and 2 don't knows. So that one's kind of on the fence a little bit. But it's a counter as a no at the moment, but we also have this veto that we can use for our record to put any one record in that any of us think is worth it.
I thought it was the only ones that turned up got to vote.
Well, we started with that, but it's been so hard for everybody to keep coming on, hasn't it, with their diaries, that that we've tried to give them all virtual votes if they've been on.
Because then the power of women would work today.
I don't mind voting it on, and we'll have a punch up with the guys when they all get on the next one.
Yes, it's interesting, actually. It's the two of us, Lisa, that really liked it. It's all the guys that are knocking it back.
I'm genuinely quite surprised by that, but that's good. I'm pleasantly surprised. You know, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think we're looking at everything at the language and I suppose there's that sort of maternal side of us as well. It thinks, my God, what a life.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of other hip hop rap albums still to come on the list. I think 2 more, but there's definitely some that no doubt we'll end up going to debate about why they're not there. David called a couple out there, and there's definitely some more. I think Martin Metcalf put a Cypress Hill record on the list as well. I think is his nomination. So we've got some others to try and get behind there as well, which should be good. So I would say that's a question mark. It's a considered no at the moment, but we'll maybe just start the next podcast and give John and George and the others a chance to sign that one off or not. Okay, but we've got 3 yeses on the podcast, so that must count for something, right? Cool, thanks for that. Okay, next one on the list was the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Okay, so what do we get from the Rolling Stone? Okay, so for the Beatles, it was a decisive goodbye to screaming crowds, world tours and assembly line record making. We were fed up being Beatles, Paul McCartney said decades later. We were not boys, we were men, artists rather than performers. Sgt. Pepper christened the summer of love with the lavish psychedelic daydream Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, the John T. Ringo Starr sung communality anthem With a Little Help from My Friends, and the album's closing multi-layered masterwork A Day in the Life. Plus the title track, which introduced the alter egos the Beatles had developed for the ambitious project. It liberated you, McCartney said, you could do anything. It's hard to imagine a more perfect setting for the Victorian jollity of John Lennon's Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, or the sumptuous melancholy of McCartney's Fictional Hole, with its blend of antique shadows and modern sunshine lead guitar, executed with ringing precision by George Harrison. The Sgt. Pepper premise was a license to take their music in every direction. Rock spent the rest of the 60s trying to keep up. So, okay, that was the Rolling Stone summary. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was released on the 26th of May, 1967. Lisa, we've had a couple of Beatles records so far. I think this might be the third one. So what's your thoughts on Sgt. Pepper's?
So 1967 was a pretty good year for music. Also, I was born. I won't mention any football.
No, don't.
Do you know, I struggle to know where to start with this. Just so much to say. I think, I mean, you could talk at length about day in the life on it, you know, on its own. And interestingly enough, I was reading the original review from the New York Times said they weren't quite so impressed actually. A day in the life is only a coda to an otherwise undistinguished collection of work. So when it was released, that particular reviewer didn't take to it so well. As you say, that they'd created this alter ego band. I think they wanted to leave behind, you know, the sort of suited, booted mop tops and say, let's do something a bit different, explore, be more inventive. And so they come up with this. In fact, look, I've even got my prop.
Oh, well done.
Very battered old version of this. And I mean, the cover itself is worth talking about, you know, because it's quite a piece of pop art. And you know, you've got the wax figures of them. Can you see that?
I can.
You know, next to their alter ego. And I'm looking at this thinking, you know, it's almost as if that to me, like the Beatles and flowers, looks like a grave, as if, you know, this lot are dead, and this is, you know, we're going to do something different. I don't know. It's probably just me and my nonsense, but anyway. And you've got all these sort of known and unknowns in the backgrounds, you know, like Marilyn Monroe, etc., and Dylan. I'm rambling now.
Did you like it?
I do like it because you know, I've grown up with it, you know, and it's just one of these ones. You know what I'm like if I've been listening to it since I was, you know, really wee. I do remember just lying. I think it's a really great record for introducing kids to music, you know, because I just, you know, I didn't know anything about it, but it just brought my imagination to life. You know, I would lie around in my mum's flat in Partick and just look at every detail on the cover and listen to these sort of fantastical, you know, like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and like it would just really fire up my imagination. But yeah, I do like it, and it's almost like it sort of takes the structure of like a variety show to me, you know, where the Lonely Hearts band come on and they introduce, you know, various different styles of acts, which are the different songs. You know, you've got the dance hall vibes of the opening track and psychedelic Lucy, and that's probably one of my favourite songs because I used to sing it to my daughter. My eldest daughter's called Lucy, so I used to sing that hard to sleep with that one. You've got this maudlin melodrama of She's Leaving Home, which is kind of, I don't know, it's a weird one for me, but the only one I really don't like is Mr. Kite. I don't like that whole circus carnival feel, but I think that's because I personally have a bit of a phobia of that kind of carnival and circus vibe. I always have had, and that it always makes me feel a bit cringy. Then you've got the sort of the Eastern influence, George Harrison's With and Without You. So it's like a whole load of different acts, and then of course the finale. In fact, the band only appear twice. They don't take over the whole record, obviously. So they're at the start, and then with the reprise, and then you have this kind of epic day in the life to finish the record off. I really don't know what else to say. I'm struggling. I've got lots of details in my head and I can't sort it out.
Okay, then, so let's bring one of the guys in then. So got a comment here from David. Let me see, this is David Ross. So David said, Sgt. Pepper's, no, surprisingly. So his justification is, I think its cultural significance and the influence it undoubtedly had masks the fact that some of the songs demonstrate the worst of McCartney's vaudevillian tendencies. If Friends and 64 had been replaced with Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, totally different conversation. So that was David's take on it. So I just maybe thought it was worth putting a wee bit of light and shade in the chat, because there is so much to talk about generally with the Beatles, and particularly this album, which is a bit of a kitchen sink album, really, isn't it? So that was Dave's take on it. We'll come back into that in a minute, Lisa. Caroline, so what's your sort of Beatles generally and Sgt. Pepper specifically, what's your take on that?
I am not as up on the Beatles as a lot of people. They're not a band that I listen to other than casually. Obviously, I'm aware of this album and I've listened to it, but probably not in as much depth as some of the other people that you be getting comments from. It's difficult for me to be objective about it, because I suppose it's been around for so long, and it's such a sort of, as you say, fixture that you've been kind of hearing it for so long without putting any critical eye across it. It's difficult to kind of then now go back and think about it. What did strike me was, and it's funny that David's mentioned When I'm 64. I mean, I suppose when I was younger, I kind of thought that was very much a novelty song, but I guess age makes me think it's quite sweet.
I think he wrote it when he was very young, McCartney.
Yeah.
He didn't write it for the album per se. I think he had sort of drafted it out when he was very young as a kind of homage to his later self, which then happened to be 5 or 6 years later.
I quite like the fact that it actually doesn't appear to be to someone in particular, because he kind of writes it off at the end as like a letter to the letters page. You're sincerely wasting away. And there's a fair amount of humour in there.
Yeah. So what do you take? So you're right, Caroline. It's hard to ignore the backstory if you want, because everybody knows something about it. But as a kind of album, when you stuck it on, listened to it, went through the songs, what did you come out at the end of it thinking?
Well, again, there's an amazing amount going on. When you hear it casually, I don't think you appreciate that. But when you sit down to actually actively listen to it, you can hear all the little touches and flourishes that are there. So, there's something of interest in every song. And there's so much, as Lisa said, there's so much diversity to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And favourite songs on it? What would you take away from that?
Probably A Day in the Life.
There's something about it, isn't there, that I certainly at the time, I don't think there was anything that was quite like it. And for the Beatles to have it as their last song on this kind of iconic album thing, I think, if that's the last thing the listener heard, and you're then left with that, I'm imagining at the time what sort of impact it must have had. I think arguably it maybe covers up some of the stuff that David touched on there, around not fillers as such, but certainly, McCartney does write a lot of poppy stuff, but he's probably wrote better pop songs on other records. Harrison's barely in the album. He contributes with In You Without You. He wasn't there for most of the recording. So yeah, it was the sort of start of a change, I guess, for them, that arguably they became, more interesting the more they diversified. But this was very much that kind of turning point, I think, for them. I think the other thing was, of course, that they'd finished all this touring, hadn't they, in '66, and it was horrible. They literally they had sort of jumped the shark, hadn't they, where they were getting death threats as they were touring the world, and the whole thing in America with the book burning and the records burning and all that stuff. So I think the studio became a bit of a safe haven, really, for them, to do what they wanted, and maybe they'd done too much. I don't know, but it is interesting. It's not an album that always keeps your interest, I think. Yeah, it's hard not to sort of switch off. So if you take David's point about Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever, because George makes the same point, and also they did All You Need Is Love at the same time. It was all recorded at the same time, and that also wasn't put on the album. So you can imagine what it might ended up looking like if 2 or 3 of those tracks had also went on it, or maybe substituted 1 or 2 to other things. And what about sort of going forward from this, kind of where are you on the whole sort of Lennon-McCartney thing, and Harrison being kind of marginalised a little bit until later on? Is it just a thing with the Beatles, or did it impact them, or what's your take on that?
I don't know. I think to be fair, I don't know much about that. I never gave that much thought. You know, I just felt that with having left behind the sort of arduous touring and all the rest of it, that they'd all kind of decided, well, you know, this is time to start experimenting, do your own thing. You know, they had all been taking LSD, and by this time even McCartney had, so that's all evident in the album. It's just, I think it's just quite an experimental album altogether. You know, trying different things. The subject matter, you know, the lyrics are very much about the mundane, the everyday. You know, if you think about it, but then, you know, the arrangements, the orchestration sort of lifts it up a wee bit, you know, in terms of they've really thought about what they were doing, you know, like, especially like Day in a Life, you know, when he's going about every day commuting, whatever, and then goes into a dream and the orchestra takes off, and, you know, it's you're sort of literally getting taken into this dream with them. I think a lot of it is quite, maybe it's just too much, I don't know, but I can see what they were trying to do, and I appreciate it for what it was.
Yeah, Caroline, any other thoughts on, I guess,
Within Without You is probably one of the weakest songs on it. I mean, there's the lyrics don't really say very much. He's just exploring that kind of Eastern sound.
well, the sort of timeline for this one was, so you had Revolver a year or so earlier to that, and in parallel to that, the Beach Boys had just released Pet Sounds, which was them replying to Rubber Soul, which had been out like a year or so after that. And then by the time the Beatles released Revolver, they then heard Pet Sounds, which came out about the same time, and then went, wow, that's game changing. We need to find a way of doing that better, which is where Peppers ended up being, or that's where it tried to be. So in that 18-month period, you went from Rubber Soul, Pet Sounds, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, all in the space of about 18 months, which, plus all the Dylan stuff that was kicking about, and the Velvets would come on to, and the Stones and stuff. So you said, Lisa, about it, you know, that sort of 67, 66, 67 being a rich seam of music. It's hard to really comprehend what all came out from that period now, even looking back. Must have been amazing to be part of, I would imagine. Also, a couple of firsts as well. So with the first sort of rock band to ever do an album playback, which is a sort of fairly norm thing now, isn't it? Where you get journalists in and you play the record and whatever. So they did it. They were the first people to do it in London somewhere. And they were the first, I think, to put all the lyrics on the sleeve of the record. I don't think anyone had done that before them. So I think a lot of these things were then getting picked up and copied by, you know, other bands. I know that Frank Zappa used the whole kind of ethos of Peppers for some of the freak out stuff that was coming out. Small Faces, and even the Stones ended up doing kind of mini concept albums just after this as well. So I don't know where I sit with this really, because you've got the influence of it, which is undeniable, I think. But then you've got, is it as a record, is it strong enough to be on the list of 100? So let's see if we get any other comments. Is there anything else you want to mention on that? Is there anything you don't like about it? Caroline, what did you not like about it?
I suppose maybe how familiar it is.
Hmm.
You know, it's kind of got its place in the cultural pantheon, and it's quite difficult to kind of separate yourself out from that and look at it critically.
Yeah,
I think that personally I suffer from that quite a lot, because I tend to find that, you know, the music that I was brought up with, and my parents always were playing records, it tends to be like, you know, I'm a big Hendrix fan because, you know, I had that, you know, Janis Joplin, Stones, whatever, and sometimes it is hard to be objective when, you know, as I said, I actually do have memories of just lying about listening to this, and, you know, and as a child it really kind of tickled me, but there's also, I mean, I think they've just decided to have a bit, they've just thought, I'm not going to be a George here, I'm just going to say, stuff it, let's do what we want to do, let's muck about here, and, you know, with Day in a Life, you know, Lennon and McCartney got back to their kind of songwriting ways together, you know, sitting, oh, do that, oh, I like that, you know, do that, yeah, that'll work, that kind of thing. They they hadn't been doing that for a while, and so they had come together again, I suppose. And there's a lot of daft things, like you just imagine them having a lot of fun making the album. You know, the sort of goofiness going on. You know, there's this, you know, they put in this whistle that only dogs can hear. You know, what's the point in that? And you know, you've got the cockerel and the gibberish that they put in at the end, and the runoff groove. You know, that apparently when they'd finished the album, they sat up till 4 a.m. perfecting that gibberish for that runoff groove. They wanted to really concentrate on that, you know. So there was a lot of daft stuff going on, you know, which I think, well, they were making an album and enjoying it, and I don't know, maybe I do find it hard to be objective.
Yeah, I think we all do a little bit. I do like the story to finish on. When they did Day in the Life, they obviously wanted to do this orchestration piece at the end, and I think they originally wanted 180 piece orchestra or something, but I think they got 40 piece orchestra in. But he got them all in, and they got them all to dress up and stuff, didn't they? So they were all wearing like either clothes or like costumes, like animal costumes and stuff like that, right? But we sat down, McCartney was kind of leading the orchestra for it, and he gave them all the sheet music, and the sheet music basically had a squiggle at the bottom left-hand side of the sheet music, and then he'd sort of just drew this kind of squiggly line to the top right-hand side of the sheet music and gave it to all of them and says, that's how I want you to play it. And they says, well, that's not notes or anything like that. He says, well, I can't write music. I just want you to go from the very lowest thing that your own instrument can play to the very highest thing that your own instrument play, and just do it kind of roughly at the same time, and we'll be fine, right? So I think it was quite avant-garde really for its time, and McCartney in particular was kind of very much into that, and no doubt we'll talk about that when we do the Velvets as well. So, I think
the very last written words on the back of the album is "A splendid time is guaranteed for all." So
they're not wrong. It was 27.
Back to that kind of sort of old dance hall type feel, you know.
Yeah. 27 weeks #1 in the UK. I mean, that literally is unheard of. And then it stopped at #1, then became #1 again after, I think, Magical Mystery Tour, I think, came out, and then that became #1 again. So again, it's kind of hard to separate how big they were from, I guess, how good they were. 4 Grammys for the album, 15 weeks #1 in America. Just that stuff just keeps coming, doesn't it?
I think it definitely has slipped in popularity though.
Do you know, funny you say that. So this Rolling Stones list, 3 times they've done this review, and the first 2 occasions they've done it, it was #1 on both lists. And then obviously this one, what was that, 24? So there has been a bit of a shift, and it's not a sort of anti-Beatles thing, because I think they've got another 2 records coming up. So I think there's still a lot of love for what they do, but the prominence of this record appears to have changed over the last few years. So.
And it's definitely not my favourite Beatles album, you know. It's just I was just trying to look at it, what they were trying to do, you know, and in terms of just being that wee bit different and experimentation.
Yeah.
However,
okay. I'd agree with all of that. So who do we have? So we have George, John, Martin Metcalf, Chris, Skin are all yeses. David, Ross, Dixon Telfer, and Jack Goliath is a no. Jack says tentative. He says a tentative no. Musically, I don't think it's up there with their other stuff, but culturally it was greatly significant and was a first for many of the things it achieved. And that's quite a nice summary, I think. Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. So, as ever, Jack kind of nails it a little bit. Okay then, so Lisa, you led us off here. In or out?
Well, I'm putting it in.
Yeah, that's
I just don't think you can not put the Beatles in. Sorry.
Yeah. And it's a wet and windy Friday afternoon, so
Beatles are going in.
The Beatles are going in.
Splendid time guaranteed for all.
I'm sort of sitting on the fence a wee bit with this, but since I'm here, I'll agree with Lisa.
Feel free not to.
No, that's fine.
there's a bit of girl power thing going on here, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, about bloody time. Caroline, it's me on my own the whole time with that lot.
Right. I'm just kind of glad Julie's not on, to be honest. I've been big
outnumbered.
Outnumbered. I mean, I will say yes, but as I considered yes, it certainly isn't my favourite Beatles album, and I'm a big Beatles fan. So I can see why all these other comments from David and others have come in. And arguably maybe it will slip down, I guess, over the years. But I think for the moment, is there 100 albums better than it around cultural and musical significance? And kind of hard to argue. I don't think there is at the moment. So I'd put it in. Okay, so that does carry it, but it is an interesting one. That one, there's quite a few out on that one. Be interesting to see if we do the other two Beatles ones. My PS to always to bring it up to the sort of current day. So 81% yes, Twitter. It's 39 minutes, which I didn't realise it was as short as that, but I guess records were then, and that's kind of sweet spot for us. About 40 minutes is kind of what we like, I guess. If you haven't heard it, I'm sure you have done, but I'd heard it and totally forgot about it. But The Fall do a fantastic version of The Day in the Life on one of these records where bands remade Sgt. Pepper's. I don't think the album's out now, but you can still get it on YouTube if you haven't heard it. It's everything you'd imagine it to be from The Fall. It's actually it's actually a very sort of straight, homage, respectful cover. It's not kind of too angry or too wacky or anything like that. He just seems to do it and finish it really. But it's really nice, worth a listen. Cool. All right, I think we'll put that one in. That's a tentative yes. So that's a couple of tentatives we've got there. We'll have a wash up on that, but it's in for the moment. Okay, so the next one takes us to our superfan, Caroline. Caroline's going to review the Velvet Underground album, The Velvet Underground. Nico, so the Rolling Stone summary was, quote, we were trying to do a Phil Spector thing with as few instruments as possible. John Cale, the classically trained pianist and viola player, said, it was no idle boast. Much of what we take for granted in rock would not exist without this New York band or its seminal debut. The androgynous sexuality of glitter, punk's raw noir, the blackened riff howl of grunge and noise rock. It is a record of fearless breadth and lyrical depth. Singer-songwriter Lou Reed documented carnal desire and drug addiction with a pop wisdom he learned as a Song Factory composer for Pickwick Records. Cale introduced the power of pulse and drone. Guitarist Sterling Morrison and drummer Maureen Tucker played with tribal force. Nico, a German vocalist, briefly added to the band by manager Andy Warhol, brought an icy femininity to the heated NUI in Reed's songs. Rejected as nihilistic by the Love Crowd in 1967, the Banana album, brackets so named for its Warhol design cover, is the most prophetic rock album ever made. Number 23 on the Rolling Stones list, and it was released in March 1967, just before Sgt. Pepper's, believe it or not. So, Caroline, I'm looking forward to this. Tell us about Velvet Underground and Nico.
Well, first of all, I hope you're impressed that I've got themed artwork on the wall.
We are so impressed.
We noticed it last night.
John Welsh would love that. He's forever pointing out things that sit behind him that he loves. So,
well, actually, strangely enough, the artwork's from when John Cale played the album in Liverpool in 2017.
Right.
And John was there too.
There you go.
We were both at that gig.
Very good.
Which was John Cale playing through the album with a kind of weird cast of characters, including Leas from Fat White Family,
Wow.
Nadine Shah, Clinic. It was a great gig. And I also, just add this, and I also went to see him play it in New York.
Oh.
The same year for the 50th anniversary.
What, playing the album again?
He played the album, yeah. He did it in
fantastic.
Liverpool, and then he did it in New York at Brooklyn Academy of Music. Wow. With people like Kurt Weill and guy from the OCs and Conor Moccasin, and I managed to be in the front row for that. So it was
that's proper fandom,
quite
isn't
a thrill, quite a thrill.
Fandom.
So I'm feeling a no vote coming here, yeah.
No. Well, my first question is, how on earth is this only at number 23? Beggar's belief.
John Welsh reckoned it should be top 3.
I think so too.
That was John's take on that. Yeah.
The album itself, and also the influence that it had, you're probably familiar with the Brian Eno quote that hardly anybody bought it at the time, but everybody who did buy it at the time formed a band.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely true. There's another good one from Lester Bangs, which says that modern music began with John Cale and the drone.
Yep.
And that was his view. And I think certainly, it didn't just influence bands then, it's still influencing them now.
And what's so great about it, Caroline?
I think, pretty much what the Rolling Stones said, redefined the parameters of what a rock record should sound like. And if you listen to it just now, it still sounds like it comes from the future.
Yeah.
You know, if you didn't know it was from 1967, you wouldn't necessarily know it's from 1967. And I think there's a few reasons for that. And again, the Rolling Stone mentioned them, but I think it's just the sort of perfect combination of people. At the time, you've got Lou coming from his English degree background and the influence of Delmer Schwartz on him. You've got John Cale, classically trained, working with avant-garde composers like Lamont Young. You've got Sterling, who doesn't get enough credit for being a really good guitarist. And then you've got one of the most original drummers of all time that kind of fell into the band because she was the sister of a pal of Sterling. You know, really distinctive. If you didn't have Mo, it wouldn't sound like the Velvet Underground, although obviously she wasn't on all the later albums. So I mean, it just sounds fantastic to me. I think that they all came together. And then of course, that's not to mention Nico. It's very deliberately called the Velvet Underground and Nico because there was a bit of resistance, I think, from Cale and Reid in particular, to having her in the band at all. But Andy, I think, was adamant, and some of Andy's factory acolytes were adamant that she should be in it as a kind of, focal point because of her, her beauty and her presence. But actually, they had written, I think, all the songs on the album. But by the time, Andy asked them to take Nico on, but Reid didn't want her singing any of the songs that he'd already written, so he wrote 3 fresh songs for her, which were obviously Femme Fatale, All to Those Parties, and I'll Be Your Mirror. And I mean, she adds something otherworldly to it, I think, although there's a pretty unkind description from Andy Warhol that says she sounds like an IBM computer with a German accent, which, I think is probably a little bit unkind. But I think, the whole package just adds together and it just absolutely works.
And was it inspired?
And it continues to work.
So was it inspired bringing Nico in? Because I'm aware of some of that kind of backstory and debate about, and looking back now, would the album have been the same without her? Or
no, I don't think it would have. Although it's not my favourite Velvet Underground album, and obviously it's the only one that she's actually on. And I don't think she and Reid ever worked together again, though Cale and obviously produced her albums and wrote with her and had a continuing relationship with her. I mean, I think it's a moment in time. I mean, I suppose her visual appeal reflected what was going on around about that time in 60s New York.
And this was recorded over it was kind of recorded and then parked for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
my understanding, it was almost recorded in a very short space of time, I think, and then they had to go back and add some other bits and pieces later on.
I remember when we did a previous podcast on something else we're talking about, I think it was 1965, I think it might have been, and Grant McPhee was talking about the Velvet Underground. Or maybe it was Adam, I can't remember, but they were saying how amazing it was that a lot of this was being recorded even earlier. As you say, it sounds so different when it comes out in the summer of love in 67, but 12, 18 months earlier, it was just nothing like it.
But I don't know if you've heard the album that's got Lou Reed doing early demos of it, and they actually sound like folk songs.
Yeah, I've heard some of them. Yeah.
That because I think that kind of demonstrates what the influence of John Cale was in making it sound so dramatically different.
Yeah, and we'll come back to your favourite album. Sorry, your favourite Velvet Underground album in a second, because this is the only one at the moment that's in the 100. It's come in fairly high, arguably should be higher, but there isn't any of the others sort of sitting behind it. And also, it was their debut studio album, which is quite hard to get your head around that, really. If you think we just done the Beatles, and Beatles were great when they started, but it was very poppy and pretty straightforward, wasn't it? It took them a while to find this kind of point of difference and stretch, and they've done this from the get-go, really, which is amazing. And
I think that's, as I said, I think quite a lot of that has got to do with the different backgrounds that they came from. They were bringing different cultural influences to it, different experiences. I mean, John Cale, didn't come from a rock and roll background, so he's not kind of taking this in the direction of rock and roll cliches, because actually that wasn't what he was doing previously. So he's bringing an approach that was informed by something else entirely.
Yeah, and is it obviously? I think they did this one. They did one more album together. Is that right? As they set up the initial band, and then Cale was left or got fired. Is that right?
Lou Reed told Sterling to tell him he was out of the band, and Sterling resented that to the end of his days.
Yeah, I read a bit about that. So do you think again that the dynamics of, if you want, of, because they were very different people, and was it always going to have a sort of short gestation period of them all sticking in the same room together?
Possibly, and I suppose
Yeah.
that was why it was surprising when they came back together in 1993 to play these shows.
Yeah.
And I mean, that always seems wild to me, because I've no idea why they picked the Edinburgh Playhouse to play the first two reunion shows, the first shows they played together for 30 years. But I'm very glad they did.
Yeah, I bet they did. Were you front row again?
I wasn't front row, but I was there both nights.
Oh, fantastic.
You know, and of course they fell out. That tour didn't even make it to America, because they fell out in Europe.
They were going to do like an unplugged stuff, weren't they? And an album was the plan, and they canned it all again. So
they canned it all again, because of course Lou Reed and John Cale had only come together again through, you know, the death of Andy Warhol, and kind of had been in each other's presence at the funeral. And out of that came what I think is a brilliant album, Songs for Drella, which is the tribute to Andy Warhol. Yeah,
and am I right in saying that for that Velvet Underground reunion, Sterling Morrison tried to get Doug Yule to tour as well?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
I think he tried to, and it was blackballed by
yeah.
Cale and Reed. They wanted just the original band to do it together. So so that was still that sort of frictional thing going on even further down the line. It's fascinating listening to it. I really like Velvet Underground, but I was a very late developer into liking their music. So I love hearing people talking about, you know, the backstories and sort of living it, really, because if you only come into it a bit later, it's you're playing a lot of catch up. For sure. And does the last sort of question really is, so the album's 48 minutes long, 11 songs on it. Does it sit as a piece of work because you've got these fantastic, lovely kind of lo-fi almost songs, and then you've got, you know, some pretty edgy, you know, heroin. Yeah. There's, I mean, I know they get a bit sort of wilder on future releases, but even in one record, it is pretty diverse, isn't it? All sits together for you, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right, and one begats the other. So you know you just, a bit like Sgt. Pepper's, you just take it as a piece of work, I guess.
As a piece of work, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back. We'll maybe talk about the album cover then before we finish. I'll bring Lisa in for her thoughts on it. Lisa.
Yeah, so this is where I don't have much experience. I'm not very knowledgeable, like Caroline, about the Velvet Underground, and I did come to this album aptly as a student in Edinburgh, and so it seemed like the perfect soundtrack to very late nights in a really dingy flat just off Palmerston Place, you know. I think initially I just found it quite mesmerising. There's just something really mesmerising about all these different sounds, the viola and the that kind of like the tuning, they call it, is it ostrich tuning, where all the guitar strings are tuned to the same note, and you get this really sort of discordant kind of sound.
It's like discordant, isn't it?
It gives it this kind of, you know, the themes are pretty dark generally, and the music really reflects that. Visually, I can just imagine, you know, a love party and, you know, 67, all these different characters, you know, they do all come from very different backgrounds. And you've got Nico, who, as Caroline says, is, you know, beautiful, German. She was an actress, so she's not really a singer. But she does bring something different to the table, you know. And there's, even though it's quite dark and raw and I don't know, I do love the album. I do love it, and it's something that I've not listened to it for a while, but when you go back to listen to it again, you see different things. And you know, there's like the first tune, Sunday Morning, the first song is actually really quite gentle, and you know, the chirpy, the chiming, and it's actually it's quite a lovely pop song. But you know, it does touch on that kind of paranoia that we've all felt, you know, after a good night out, and you know, the sun's shining and you think, oh, thank goodness it's Sunday, but you're like, oh, you know, it's I think we can all identify with that. But as a song, I think it's a really lovely song. Yeah, so there's some quite poppy songs in there, I would
Yeah.
say. Like,
Yeah.
There She Goes Again. And I think Nico's I'll Be Your Mirror is incredibly sweet. Thrown into this mix. So yeah, I really like it. I mean, it's just so unbelievably different. And as Caroline says, you could be looking at the future, not back in 1967. It's and obviously paved the way for loads of other bands.
Yeah, it did. So I think the interesting point here, I think, is, this and Sgt. Pepper's coming out pretty much the same time. But this
How
arguably,
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it appears to have stood the test of time more, this record. So I think I'll call it timeless, for want of a better word. The Peppers record appears to be more of the 60s. Whereas
It's become a bit of a sort of cliched record, hasn't it? That this sort of Peppers thing.
I think, as Carling says,
some things musically that were similar, with the orchestra and the 41-second piano chord. There was some of that going on there.
Yeah,
but
they were a pop band, right? They're moving into rock, weren't they? I think, Velvet Underground were never a pop band in inverted commas. They were always doing something slightly more kind of avant-garde and a bit different. But yeah, it's like Carling said in our chat there, that it sounds as if it could have been released today or tomorrow, and you would still listen to it and go, wow, that's a bit different. Which I think,
it still seems very fresh.
It does.
On listening to it again.
It does. A couple of comments from the guys. What did Goliath say? Yeah, he was, it's another yes, a truly unique sound and production, which is especially impressive considering it's mostly guitar based. So I think what Jack's saying is, although the viola and stuff were all in there, it was, as you say from the demos, Caroline, they were all fairly standard songs when they were written, and then they've kind of developed and expanded them, which was really nice. We've got, what did David say? David said, yep. So yes, so just think of the group's albums we wouldn't have had without this, and it still sounds fresher today than the vast majority of records made. Which is right. And I think all the guys, everybody, I think I mentioned earlier, John reckons it's a top 3 for sure, so no doubt we'll have a recount on that. And everyone else voted it as a yes as well. Carleen, you get any sort of final thoughts? So tell us about the cover then. So what about this iconic cover? And the original one had that sort of peeled.
Yeah, peel slowly and see.
Yeah.
I don't have that one, unfortunately.
Oh, Caroline.
Disappointed now. I thought you were just going to lift it from the side there. No.
I thought that was going to be your pièce de résistance. Yes, I have it, and here it is.
No, sadly not. I do have something signed by John Cale, but not that, sadly.
Wow.
I have seen a signed one in an exhibition in New York that was signed by the Velvet Underground, Nico and Andy Warhol. And unsurprisingly, it had been lent from the collection of a Rothschild.
Okay, right.
So I think that probably signifies how expensive it would be to acquire these days.
And did you not bump into John Cale at a bus stop or something?
No.
Somewhere?
No. Well, that was just a poster.
I was a poster, was it?
You did. You did.
I was giving you an
no.
I did actually meet him briefly after a Q&A that he did in New York, and he kind of looked, when he heard my voice, he kind of looked at me funny and said, "Where are you from?" Because I clearly wasn't from New York.
Clearly, yeah.
And I said, "No, Edinburgh," and he kind of smiled and said, I thought so. He still sounds incredibly Welsh.
Does he? Yeah. It's amazing that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I obviously, I think we're all going to say, love the record, fantastic, iconic, groundbreaking, all those things, right? For sure. So if it's not your favourite Velvet album, what is and why?
Well, the first Velvet Underground album I heard, and I think this is probably the one that most people heard first, was actually 69 Live. I think somebody must have written about it in the NME and it sounded interesting, and I went away and bought it, not without having heard a note of it. That was certainly when I was a teenager, because I was living with my parents at the time. I can remember listening to it in their front room. But my favourite is White Light, White Heat.
Okay, that's interesting. Because?
Sister Ray.
Okay.
All 17 glorious minutes of Sister Ray. And also because it's quite Cale heavy as well.
It is, yeah. I was going to say that is, yeah, absolutely. It is.
I mean, the later ones, you know, went a bit more in Lou's direction and were a bit more poppy.
Yeah, which I guess is probably why I love them a bit more. So,
Yeah.
but and that's fine. That's a great thing about the band, isn't it? That, you know. So would you? Is this the iconic lineup then?
For me, yes.
It is, right. Because again, you know, when Doug Yo joined, they got lots of commendations for Velvet Underground and for Loaded, didn't they? So
yeah, and obviously, you know, I said 69 Live was my first, and he's on, you know, he's on that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not particularly popular at the time, but then became more and more popular. It has now sold a lot of stuff, but you know, it's probably not a sort of bestseller in inverted commas, but as an influence, it's certainly a best influence record, for sure. I was amazed that they supported U2 on that
Yes.
reunion tours. They were doing their own gigs. They were starting for U2, which I've found amazing, to be honest.
Bizarre.
Very bizarre, yeah. Yeah, can't quite get my head around that. Which is fine. And the other thing I saw, just to finish, was when they got together at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and they performed just after Stelly Morrison had died. Is that right? And they did the sort of song, I think, so Mo Tucker wrote the bones of it, and John Cale, I think, did the rest of it and played it. Just played it once, I think. Is that right?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I say goodbye to my friend. So, yeah, it's, if you haven't, well, I know you have, but if anyone hasn't saw it in the podcast, go on YouTube. It's fantastic. So, I probably fell in love with this record even more now that I have this in CD somewhere. I don't have an album version, so this is on my list of getting back out and putting some money down and getting another copy again. Lisa, you're going to be a tick box here, I'm sure.
Well, in terms of originality and impact, it has to go in, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes without saying, Caroline, you're a yes, yeah?
Yeah, and I'm with John on it. I think it should be in the top 3.
Well, what we get the chance to do, and all of our guests will also get the chance to do this, if and when we get to 100 albums, which we will at some point, we're going to then re-rank that 100, 100 to 1, and we'll all do that together, so that'll be an exercise in itself, which should be good fun. So we're voting that one in. As I say, it's the only one at the moment in the 100, but fingers crossed we might get another one in. Cool, very good. That's Velvet Underground and Nico, which is a yes from everybody, which is lovely. And to finish off, we have number 21 on the Stones list, which is Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. Okay, so the summary of this was Bruce Springsteen spent everything he had, patience, energy, studio time, the physical endurance of his E-Street band to ensure that his third album was a masterpiece. His reputation as perfectionist begins here. There are a dozen guitar overdubs on the title track alone. He was also spending money he didn't have. Engineer Jimmy Iovine had to hide the mounting recording bills from the Columbia paymasters. The album became a monster, Springsteen told his biographer. It just ate up everyone's life. But in making Born to Run, Springsteen was living out the central drama in the album's tenement love operas, Backstreets and Jungleland, and Gun the Engine, Rock and Roll, Thunder Road, Born to Run. The fight to reconcile big dreams with crushing reality. He found it so hard to translate the sound in his head, the Jersey Bar dynamite of his live gigs, Phil Spector's Wagnerian grandeur, the heartbreaking melodrama of Roy Orbison's hits, that Springsteen nearly scrapped Born to Run for a straight-up concert album. But his make-or-break attention to detail, including the iconic cover photo of Springsteen leaning onto saxman Clarence Clemens, a perfect metaphor for Springsteen's brotherly reliance on the E-Street brand, assured the integrity of Born to Run's success. In his determination to make a great album, Springsteen's produced a timeless, inspiring record about the labours and glories of aspiring to greatness. Okay, that was a summary. Last one tonight. Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run's third studio album, second on our list, and it was released on the 25th of August, 1975. So I'm just going to kick us off by reading the summary from David Defrost. So David gave us some nice comments on this one. So Bruce is a yes. So what he says was, I guess Springsteen for many represent relatively standard safe rock and roll, and the live experience is undoubtedly his natural habitat. Therefore, he's not really considered as groundbreaking or innovative, and maybe that's why many wouldn't have this in the top 100. But Born to Run is a real working class record that represents a whole demographic of people disillusioned with the bullshit of the American dream. Springsteen's what I think the Clash thought they could have become. and Born to Run, the song, is the single greatest expression of a youthful desire to break free from society's restrictions, even in the knowledge of what to do, that freedom is unknown. Dave was pretty good at putting some words together, and that was his summary of Born to Run. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I will pass it round the three of us, but I just wanted a wee bit of external context on that one. I'll just add a couple of comments on, we reviewed Darkness quite a long time ago now. I think it was like in the 90s or something on the list.
I don't think I remember that.
Well, we did, because we voted it out, and I was devastated. I
obviously do remember, because I think you were devastated at what I said.
Devastated, right? But that was fine, and I remain fine about it. That's the whole point of doing it. But I was always kind of interested when we got further down that there was going to be another one, so I was quite kind of interested in that. I would sort of paraphrase what David said. I was a very late developer to Springsteen. In fact, I had a flatmate in Dundee who loved him, and I didn't. I was very much into Lloyd Cole, the Waterboys, all that stuff at the time. And that only changed when I went to see him live, and that was about 91, 92 in Glasgow. My friend Andy took us, and it just changed my perspective on him. And since then I became, a bit of a fan, and still don't love all his studio stuff by all means, but I certainly see a lot more of what he is now than I did when I was a bit younger. So there's a bit more in this album for me, but I won't say too much more on that, because I've got a lot of time for it. Interestingly, it's probably an album I don't listen to as much as other Springsteen albums. And I think it might be that kind of Sgt. Pepper's fatigue thing for me. I just know it so well that I kind of go to other stuff and then end up coming back to it now and again. But I listened to it for the podcast, and I've got to be honest, I absolutely loved it. 8 songs, 40 minutes. He had this idea of doing corners or backstops or bookends to the record. So first track, last track, both sides are these kind of iconic storytelling songs. And the album gets kind of darker as it goes through, and it ends up pretty dark with him dying in Jungleland, or the guy dying. And if I've been honest with you, I stopped really hearing all that quite a number of years ago, but having gone back and starting to listen to it again, he's playing some of these things live again now. I had the pleasure of seeing him a couple of times this year, and he's playing Backstreets and Jungleland and stuff like that, which is very powerful to see it live. But yeah, so I'm a big fan, but I was a big fan the last time they got voted out. So, so I'll pass it back to you two guys to tell me what you think. Who's going to go? Lisa, Born to Run.
No, don't ask me, because I'm not a big fan.
Come on, now, come on.
Yeah, so I've never really been a Springsteen fan, and I can't really think why. I just always think of that sort of big sort of stadium rock. It's just something that never passed my way, I suppose. I knew all the big hits, obviously, but like you were into other music when you were younger, but I never really got round to the Springsteen thing. So, I only really listened to it for the last podcast, and as I think you'll probably remember, it was really, I just found the way he sings really quite unbearable. I hate that kind of strained voice. I really just couldn't get to grips with Darkness at all. So I've given this one a go, and I'm happy to say that I actually did quite like this album. Okay. And incredibly, I find that I think his vocals are just so much better in this album than in Darkness. Okay. I think he's just more, I don't know, definitely his singing in this is a bit more kind of, his notes are a bit more razor sharp. I don't know, there's certain songs definitely, but I think I was more aware of that, he's talking about sort of quite kind of, again, mundane things, trying to escape that the kind of doldrums and that kind of depressed life, and it's that sort of romantic idea of escaping, but which is pretty average, I suppose. But I did notice that, I think the imagery he uses is quite impressive, and I hadn't really ever thought about that or noticed that, and I think that lifts it up for me. So yeah, I did enjoy listening to it. I'm not sure how often I would go back to it though.
Okay.
I'm afraid.
Okay, that's fine. When he made it, he was in his head doing an updated version of West Side Story. Of that street culture and, you know,
Yeah,
that
there
kind
is
of
that kind of
way
sort of
of life.
theatrical side to it,
Yeah.
sort of romantic,
And one of the interesting things about it,
hyper-realism.
having known the album for a long time, of course, he's from New Jersey, not from New York. But if you understand how the album is, the last two songs are about him going across the river to New York, to Manhattan, to do something, you know, to get involved in drugs or something like that. And then the last song, Jungle Land's based in New York, and that's the only song that's actually about New York. The others are about more sort of general things to do with growing up and life and stuff like that. So he obviously had given it a lot of thought, and arguably too much thought, because it took forever to make, and, you know, he nearly didn't release it and stuff like that. So I guess you can get too close to things, maybe, rather than just making a record and whacking it out, a la Ramones or whatever. So, Caroline.
I have to confess I've got a bit of a Springsteen blind spot.
That's okay.
I've never really listened to him much,
okay.
And I knew this at the time, and I knew the big songs on it and whatever. But I thought when I played it again for the podcast, I thought it sounded incredibly dated.
Okay, like the production and stuff.
Yeah, just, you know, it's kind of quite, you know, it's putting it all out there. It's quite overblown's probably the wrong word, but it's certainly, you know, it's and for me it takes itself too seriously as well. I felt it was a bit pompous.
So it's a bit too sort of contrived, and
yeah, well, just a bit too kind of self-aware of itself, if you see what that doesn't probably make any sense. But maybe that goes back to what you're saying, Brian, that he didn't whack it out and it was maybe a bit over thought. So maybe that's what I'm taking from it.
He was under intense pressure at the time, so he'd already done 2 albums. They'd had a bit of sort of positive reception. He had a very strong live following, but he just wasn't selling any records. And the third record was his kind of make or break record. So maybe you're right, Caroline, all of this stuff was just like the world was on top of him, I guess, you know. And it is a very serious record. You're right. If you hear other stuff, there's lots of humour in his records, but there's very little of it on this record.
And that's maybe for the reasons that you said there, Brian. Maybe. I mean, I can appreciate the qualities that other people appreciate, and I've only seen him live once, and that was actually a solo show, so it was only him and Patty coming on for a few songs, which obviously was a very different beast from playing with the E Street Band. You know, you know, I can appreciate, you know, he's speaking, you know, as David said, he's speaking for, you know, a disenfranchised bit of America. You know, he's got a lot of authenticity going on there, so I can appreciate all that without actually necessarily being warming to what it is that he's actually doing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's interesting on your sound. I kind of agree. I think it's overproduced, I think. Would be I'd maybe take it, because he had something in his head about, I think he says he wanted to be Dylan singing like Orbison, produced by Spector. Like, that's what he said.
That's a high ambition.
That was the sound in his head that he was trying to do, and I'm not sure anyone can do that, really. So yeah, maybe
he was definitely very determined and with a dream to be successful, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was. And then of course it did get quite popular. He ended up you know, a cover of Time magazine and all that stuff. Talked about him in the future of rock and roll, which I think he didn't like that either. Came over to UK, didn't he, and toured, and had all these posters up everywhere saying we've seen the future of rock and roll, and he ripped them all down from the venues. And so he was a fairly troubled guy, you know, at the time. And if you've read anything about him, he's latterly admitted to having significant health issues, mental health and stuff like that. So yeah, the success didn't come easily to. I don't think it sat particularly well with him either. But I guess it's just for us to judge the record. A couple of things to kind of add to that. Maybe we can have a wee wash up and finish. This was actually the first album that people talk about the E Street Band. This was the first album that what we would class to be the E Street Band actually all played on. It's a bit like the Velvet Underground question, Caroline, about, you know, the iconic lineup of the Velvets. So this actually was the first time that all of the E Street were all on one record. And even then, Steve Van Dance doesn't play guitar on it. He only He only sort of sings backing vocals and does a bit of arrangement and stuff like that. So it did all kind of come together, and I suppose in his own way he never looked back, but the PS to all of it was, after having made it, he then ended up in dispute with his manager, Mike Apple, who had basically got him to this point, and they fell out, and he had an injunction placed against recording and releasing any more records for thick end of 3 years, which is where Darkness came from. So whatever you think of Darkness, that's why it's so dark. You know, wherever he left Born to Run, he just ended up in the worst place again. By the time Darkness came out, which I guess probably comes across a bit on the sound. Cool. I've mentioned some of the other guys' comments. Someone else I was going to mention. Yeah, so it sold well, 7 million records, a whole bunch of stuff going on there. Talked about West Side Story. When they were in dispute on the recording, he allowed some of the E Street to go and record other records, and the kind of rhythm section from the band went and recorded Bat Out of Hell with Meatloaf.
That's interesting, because there are moments in this where it kind of reminds me of
100%. Well, Jim,
you know, and maybe that's another off-putting.
Jim Steinman said that Jungle Land was the song that he based pretty much the whole album on, and he was lucky enough to blag a few of the guys from the band to then play on it. So you're right, you can see that whole...
Like, that's funny, because I didn't know that, but I kept getting wee kind of feelings of like, that sounds like... Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't know that either, but I think that might be at the root of why I think it sounds a bit overblown.
Yeah, I agree entirely. But you tell me you don't love Battle of Hell, Caroline?
Guilty pleasure.
That's a guilty pleasure, you're absolutely right. Quick PS to finish on it, because he talked about his live stuff, and I've had the pleasure of seeing him a few times. He's always good live. But he didn't do it this latest tour, but prior to that, he's done quite a lot of sort of sign requests and stuff. On his gigs, he basically goes around, picks up signs from the crowd and just waves them at the band, and then just starts singing the songs. He's kind of quite famous for it. But when he played a few years ago, it was just after Clarence Clemens died, I think, the saxophonist, and they was touring, and somewhere, I think it was Berlin or somewhere in Europe, and somebody held up the sign for Born to Run, and they took the sign and they played the whole album. Oof. Just as a decision, and kind of spur of the moment decision, and they'd never done that before. Played the whole album, and they played it straight through, and you can imagine how that went down. And so I think, you know, he has got this what's the word for it? He has this touch point, I think, with the people that he's connected to, that is quite important and relevant. But he also gets very serious at times, and sometimes that can be a bit too much, I think, for certain people. Okay, cool. So let's have a wee vote on it. So a mixed bag with this one. So John, George, David, Chris and Skin are all yeses on this one. Dixon Telver says, you like this one, Lisa? Dixon says, if I can find it, I just find him overrated. Sorry. His voice isn't that good, and it's so American. He's good at what he does, but it's all a bit beige for me. It was Dixon. Which was fine. Everyone else was a yes, apart from Jack. So Jack said, he said, yeah, it's good, but I think there's better. Do this kind of idea of sort of rock or American rock. I think Springsteen, but the rest of the guys were all yes. Cool. So, Lisa.
Well, as Lennon said, you know, I'd love to turn you on. This just doesn't turn me on. I'm sorry. There's just something about just sameness about it, that just that sound. You know, they say that really good music, you know, will put your hairs on end, and I'm just so far from that with this music, I'm afraid. So I know it sounds like you're supposed to love Bruce Springsteen, and it feels like sacrilege if I say no, I'm not putting it in, but no, I'm not.
Okay, thank you. Caroline.
I can see why other people would put it in. You know, going back to the bit that I said about appreciating these qualities without necessarily enjoying them myself. But it wouldn't be in my top 100.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to add up numbers here, so bear with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's 6 yeses, 1, 2, 3, it's 4 no's. and a question mark. Martin Metcalf wasn't sure about it, so he sat on the fence. It was very
The women are definitely concurring today.
The women are all over it. I forgot to give Julia a name check from the Velvet review, because if you remember, she put the picture of her poster on her wall, I think it was.
Yes.
That's right, yeah. So
Yes.
I'm sure she would have been a big yes as well, and hopefully we'll get her back on. 63% were yes on Twitter. And the only PS I had to that was two really, was that I've got a bit of respect for him when he played Glastonbury. I don't know if you remember that. He'd never done a festival before. He'd only ever played his own gigs. And somebody, Michael Eavis or somebody, persuaded him to do it. Anyway, he came and played, and if you don't know the story, he turned up and played his whole set. And they got fined for busting the curfew and all that stuff, because he played for thick end of 3 hours, which nobody really expected. And Michael Eavis says, I never asked him. So that was his fault, really. And the other thing was, so we've got, Caroline, we've been asked to put together some records from our lists that we think might get added, and you're hopefully going to give us one as well to think about. So I'm actually going to bring in another Springsteen record for consideration, just to cheer Lisa up. Sorry, Lisa. So we'll see how that one goes. It's a belter, by the way. Very un-Springsteen-esque. All right.
Well, I think I know which that one might be.
Go on then.
Is it the one that is covering the songs of got his name, Pete Seeger?
No, it's not. No, it's not actually. I really like that, to be fair. No, I'm toying with the idea of bringing Nebraska in.
All right, okay.
Which is basically 10 demos that he recorded and released, and the record company were going mental at the time, because it was just on the river and it was mega huge and all that stuff. And again, just if you know anything about him, it's just the way he is. He kind of does his own thing again, and it's quite a special record. But I haven't decided yet, but it's certainly on the short list for sure. Okay, so as it stands, we have Carole an absolute yes, Beatles yes, just about, Velvet Underground yes, Biggie no, just about, and Springsteen yes, just about. Was 4 out of 5 that we got there. So 48, 5, 52, that gives us out of 80. Cool. I don't know that works out as. All right. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Before we go, Caroline, you get the opportunity to nominate, as all guests do, a record that we think should be added to the 100 list. So give us what your record is and why.
Well, I thought long and hard about this, and I was looking on the list to see artists that hadn't been represented, rather than lobbing in somebody from the usual suspects. Although I can't actually believe this person isn't on the list, because he's one of the greatest American songwriters. He's got an amazing gift for storytelling. We talked about storytelling in relation to Bruce and in relation to Biggie today. And it's going to be Rain Dogs by Tom Waits. I could have picked any one of that triptych of albums, Swordfish Trombones, Rain Dogs, or Frank's Wild Years, but I'm going to go for Rain Dogs because I saw him on that tour and he was amazing.
Perfect. No, we don't have any Tom Waits, and he isn't on the 100, which is a bit surprising. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Chris Thompson will love you for that.
I'm glad somebody will.
Every time I hear the Bathers, I always think of Tom Waits. So, yeah, that's brilliant. The guest nominations have been so eclectic. It's been great. So that'll give us something else to get our chops round. Brilliant. Thanks for that. Okay, the 5 on the next recording. Sorry, Caroline, you can give us a quick yes or no on these if you want. Since we managed to drag you on the Friday afternoon. Okay, next 5 are Radiohead, Kid A.
No.
Kendrick Lamar, To Pimp a Butterfly.
Yes.
Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited.
Yes.
Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
I don't know that one, so I'll have to sit on the fence.
And London Calling.
Oh, yes.
Clash.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, well, they're pretty eclectic again, so we'll no doubt we'll have some fun doing those. Caroline, I can't thank you enough, because the guys who are going to watch it don't really know that we tried to do this last night and it just didn't work out. We're blaming this bad storm thing that happened. So so we've had another go today, and thankfully all the technology's all held together. So thank you very much for that. I hope it's not been too painful.
No, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me. It's been nice to spend a rainy afternoon in your company and Lisa's company.
And
Thank
nice
you.
to see you again, Caroline.
Yes, yes.
Thank
What's
you.
your next gig?
It's next week. Bathers,
All
Sister
right.
John, and Cowboy Mouth. The Cowboy Mouth, I should say.
I think you're
Always a good gig. So quite an interesting venue as well. It's the debating chambers at Glasgow Uni.
Yes, I saw that.
yeah.
So see how that goes. I've never been to a gig there. So
How many gigs you going
looking
to next
forward
week,
to it.
Caroline?
I've got Eyes of Others tomorrow night. I've got Young Fathers and Callum Easter on Monday.
Oh,
And I've got Kid Congo on Wednesday.
Kid Congo's The Cramps.
It was in the Cramps, and he was in the Bad Seeds as well.
Of course,
and,
yeah, absolutely.
The Gun Club.
So Mr. Welsh will be at that one, right?
And Mr. Welsh will be at that one, I would imagine.
I'm hoping to get to Young Fathers Monday night if the diary can free me up.
I'll keep an eye out for you.
I'll message you from there for sure.
Okay, that's great.
Guys,
I
thank
still
you.
haven't seen them, but I really want to.
Oh, they're brilliant.
Flag a ticket then.
I'm always too late to the party and the tickets are sold out, you know, or something goes wrong, but I'll get there.
See if we can blag one for Monday night. Okay. Guys, thank you very much again for your time. Really appreciate that. And enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a lovely weekend. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care. See you later.
Bye. Bye.